You're listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies. And today, my guest is award winning filmmaker Mike Dorsey. And we're going to be talking about his new documentary entitled Sisters of Ukraine. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Mike.
Of course, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. This, again, very timely to have this documentary come out at this particular time. And so much in it too to talk about. So our audience knows. Can you give us a synopsis of what Sisters of Ukraine is all about?
Sure. So about 8 months after the war started, the main invasion of the main part of Ukraine, we traveled to Western Ukraine with a group of Spanish volunteers from Barcelona, and we stayed at a convent with Catholic nuns there of these young nuns who were helping refugees uh, both escape the eastern part of Ukraine for the western part, where it's relatively safer, and to leave the country completely for those of you who want. And then after spending several days with the nuns, on being under missile attack by the Russians, we then traveled by land across Europe with a big group of refugees to housing in Barcelona. So we showed that whole process and really brought attention to the plight of, this is the biggest refugee crisis in Europe since World War II. Is over 8 million people have been displaced outside of Ukraine, and another 8 million are displaced within the country. So it's massive, massive, horrible situation.
I know it's just hard to fathom, how massive it truly is, but you've
Right.
brought it to life, for us to see. How did you get involved in this project?
I was contacted by an almond grower actually up near Fresno named Stephen Campos, and his family they had family friends back in Spain. That's their heritage, and they were friends with some people that were involved in this NGO, this aid group out of Barcelona that was doing this, and so they just had the idea. They'd never made a film before, and through a mutual contact, they reached me, and we came together very quickly within really a matter of weeks from us conceiving the idea of doing this. We were on the road and in the air to Barcelona and then Warsaw and then drove into Ukraine. It was really amazing how fast it happened.
That is amazing
Right.
to have that happen so quickly. So then how long did it take you to actually film this?
We filmed the whole thing in like 9 days.
What?
From It was just because we shot it cinema verite style, so it was fully embedded with the people in the story from beginning to end, and that's how long this whole situation took from when we got to Barcelona, the time it took to go to Poland and then drive into Ukraine, and then the days we spent there, and then the multi-day drive back to Barcelona again. The whole thing took like 9 days. So it was a pretty quick production.
I'll say that really is a quick production. I've never heard
Mhm.
that quick. I mean, I've heard it for some
Sure.
independent films who don't have a big
Mhm.
budget, but documentaries usually take a
Right.
whole lot longer to do. So I have not
Sure.
heard it that way. So when you started this, the area of the Ukraine that you were headed to was an area that they really was considered more safe because none of the bombing and none of the war really had kind of migrated to that part of the country.
Right.
But as you were filming this, that all changed. Talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Safe is a relative term. We knew
Yes.
the instant we drive into Ukraine, you are in a war zone. You are a potential target, especially with us being an American film crew. We were told that made it especially risky for us to be there. Uh, and yes, we were in Ivano-Frankivsk, which is a western city in Ukraine, and they had been attacked. In the opening hours of the war, literally the convent that we stayed at was right at the edge of an airbase, and that airbase had been bombed 2 hours into the start of the war, and they had to flee. They'd had to evacuate their area of the city, and came back a few months later when things quieted down and all the fighting moved to the Eastern Front. So yeah, it was relatively quiet, and that's what we were expecting. And what we didn't anticipate was the night before we drove in, the Ukrainians bombed the bridge, the Kerch Bridge in Crimea, which is a big symbol of national pride for the Russians because the Russians built it. And it really angered Putin and the Russians, and that's when all of these strikes that are so common now, where the Russians just missile strike and drone strike all the cities in Ukraine, not just the parts that are strategically have to do with where the fighting is. It's just a terror campaign. They're bombing civilians. They're purposely targeting apartment blocks. They're attacking infrastructure. They're bombing power plants so that people will freeze to death in the wintertime. That started happening the first day that we were in Ukraine. So it was just a wild turn of events timing wise that we happened to go in right when that started.
Amazing. But that also brings the war closer to home by you showing it in this film
Right.
and how it affected everyone.
And we show that the change in attitude while when we were there because in Ivano-Frankivsk, I remember the first day we're there, our first time seeing the city, we saw a closed off road with police and we thought, oh no, what's happening? And then we realized there was a 5K run going on. That's how kind of some normalcy they had tried to return to in that city. And then by that evening at sunset, we heard our first air raid sirens. And all the Ukrainians have an app on their phone that shows the map of the country and all the regions that are currently under threat. And for the first time since the invasion, all the regions in Ukraine were lit up. And they were panicking because they hadn't seen that in months. And then the next day, the actual, the bombing started, and a power plant 19 miles from us was hit in that first wave of attacks, and the whole country was on lockdown, and it was really, really stressful for them to see
I
that
can
shift.
imagine. Yeah, I can imagine. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I just want to go back. I'm amazed that there's an app on people's phones
Right.
that shows
To
them what.
track if you're under missile attack or not. Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
And it was and hearing these nuns, they run a school and we were at their school when this lockdown happened. So we're locked down at their school with all these kids. And I just remember the nuns explaining to the parents, like, you don't have to come and pick your kids up. The school is on the outskirts of the city. It's not near anything strategic. And I just remember thinking, like, imagine being an American having that conversation. Your kids are safe. The school's in a strategic area where it's going to be bombed. I just can't imagine. It really brought it home, and I can't imagine being in that situation.
I know. And hopefully we never have to.
Right.
And let's hope we don't have to for sure.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the NGO workers from Spain because there was only what,
Hmm.
two
Yeah,
people.
it was Eduardo and Rafa.
Yeah, and kudos. I mean, just amazing that they decided to do this also, and take this journey and a perilous journey, a very
Absolutely.
perilous journey to do this and then the nuns. Let's talk about the Sisters of Ukraine for
Absolutely.
all of them.
Well, Rafa, one of the Spanish volunteers, he's made, I think, at least a dozen trips now back and forth over since the war started. And those have been both trips to get refugees out, and those have also been trips to take in supplies. I remember he took in a big generator so that they could power the this convent whenever the power goes out, since they've been bombing the power stations there. So he's made tons and tons of trips over there. And then these young nuns. Mother Christiana is the leader of this convent. She's probably around my age. She's probably in her 40s. All the other nuns are young women. They're all probably early to mid 20s.
Oh,
And they didn't sign up for this. They are there to run a school. They're there to be teachers. And they've been thrown into this situation where they're now doing double duty, running a school and running basically a refugee aid organization there in Ukraine. And I've never seen people who, from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep, they are completely dedicated to service of other people. I can't imagine just how tiring that is, and they get it in 7 days a week from sunrise to sunset. That's what they do.
so inspiring.
Yeah,
So inspiring. And we still we need that. We need inspiration right now too. So
absolutely.
they've continued to do this
Right.
perilous journey. What has any because the war has escalated and continued so long, how have things changed?
Um, how have things changed? I honestly, it's just been more of the same. It's just never. It seems like it's never going to end. There's the stalemate happening, and I think one thing that's changed is a lot of these refugees, like the group that we took over, for example, a lot of them it was going to be temporary for them. We're just going to leave for a bit. We're going to get a break from the war and then we're going to go home. Or, we're going to stick it out until the war ends and then we're going to go home. A lot of them had never been out of Ukraine before. A lot of them had never seen the ocean before. And, and now I think I've been back since then, and I think quite a few of them have just set up new lives there at this point. And a lot of them have husbands that are still fighting in the war because men of a certain age are not allowed to leave Ukraine. They're expected to stay back in case they need them. So it's a lot of the women and children that are leaving. And they've just set up new lives in Spain and other countries around the world. And I told my crew, I said, this is how immigrant communities start up in various cities. I said, you come back to this suburb of Barcelona where this housing is in 10 years, and you're going to see like a Ukrainian market and a Ukrainian restaurant. And it'll have a sign up that says "Little Ukraine." Like it's like so many other places. They're going to stay because also Spain's a beautiful place to live. So
Yes.
that's I think that war one of the consequences of war is it scatters people, and a
Hmm.
lot of them never come back. Yeah,
Yeah. And well, whether that whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, we don't
right.
know. But it's better to be safe, right?
Exactly right. Yeah.
And live a life in a peaceful
Yeah,
place.
and
Then,
I have a former coworker here in Los Angeles who housed a family, a Ukrainian family here who needed a place, and she had a big house with a bunch of empty rooms, so she just let this like family of four, I think, move in with her for a while. And the husband back in Ukraine was the vice president of an engineering company, very successful person. And then he comes here and has to start from nothing. They have nothing. They have no furniture. They have no home. And they finally were able to get into an apartment. And then she did a fundraiser to like, they need plates, they need dishes and blankets and, toys for their kids, like everything you have in your home. They're starting at nothing. And, this guy has to build a new career here and everything. So,
but
yeah,
you know how we are in America. We all step up. We're all willing to help. I'm sure that
sure.
the end of their fundraiser was successful, and hopefully someone was able to give this man a good job, a good way to
Sure.
start, too. But that's
Yeah.
what we need. It's just building it up little by little by little, by just
Hmm.
people being generous and coming from their heart and wanting to help people. Again,
Right.
service, just like, the sisters of Ukraine in this
Right.
film. Did you ever, I mean, as you were filming this, did you ever feel yourself and your crew to be in danger?
Sure. The day that we were under missile attack, definitely felt danger. We had MiGs flying over us for the rest of the time we were there. Some Ukrainian, some we're not sure. And we debated whether or not we should keep staying at the convent since it was right at the edge of this airfield, which was, an actual military strategic target that the Russians could have gone after. Um, yeah, we felt in danger from that point on. The rest of the time we were in Ukraine, we felt in danger, and I didn't tell my parents I was going there.
Oh,
So they're elderly, and I told them I was going to Poland, and then it wasn't until literally the moment we got back into Poland after leaving Ukraine that I called my dad and told him
what
I'm
was
safe
their
now, but here's where I've been for the past 4 days. So
what was their reaction?
my dad, he's like, I knew something was up. I knew you probably weren't telling me everything. I was like, yeah, but they were happy that I made it, and they were also, I think, kind of happy I didn't tell them ahead of time.
Oh,
Yeah. I
probably.
told I told one friend here in Los Angeles, like just in case something happens, I need somebody to know where I've been, so you can spread the word. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that it was better that you didn't tell them because they would worried the whole time you were over
sure.
there. And that would not have been good for their health,
No,
to be in that much, worry all the time about their son. So,
right.
see, you've worked on a lot of different projects, so this one is a little different for you, correct?
It
Compared.
is. Most of my docs have been, things that have already happened. The World War II, true crime, cases that have already happened, that kind of thing. So what we call talking head productions, where it's just a lot of interviews, sit down interviews with various people. This is the first one I shot of a current ongoing story that was unfolding as we were filming, where we were, I use the term cinema verite, which is just
Mhm.
live and in the moment, cameras on shoulders, following the subjects around as the story unfolds. No interview. This is what I was thinking when that was happening, and blah blah blah. It's just all live and in the moment. And I had never done a documentary that way. It was really exciting.
I can imagine,
Hmm.
and
I wanted the tension and to make the audience feel like what it was like to be there with us, which the film really does feel exactly like what
it
it was like
does.
to go through this. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It does. It brings it right right home, so we can.
Right.
We're feeling it exactly, and that makes it very powerful.
Thank you.
The way that you have put it together, definitely. You have a podcast too, so tell me a little bit
I
about your
do. Yeah,
podcast.
I have so one of my other passions is Hollywood history. So I have a Hollywood history podcast called Dearly Departed Podcast. And we did a bunch of shows that are on iTunes and all the various podcast sites. And then a few years ago, we started doing it just Patreon only and doing kind of less of them. But yeah, those all those episodes are still up and they're a lot of fun. It's all kind of the dark side of Hollywood, kind of death in Hollywood, things like that.
Like murders and murder mystery kind of
Some
thing?
murder stuff, but also just I teamed up with this guy called Scott Michaels, who's an historian, and he had a tour company in LA that was popular for a lot of years called Dearly Departed Tours, and he has a website called findadeath.com, and it's all about he got obsessed with what happens when a celebrity dies. A lot of times that's the story ends, but he was intrigued in what were the last days like, what happened afterwards. That was kind of where he picked up. He found kind of this niche, and people are really are fascinated by that. So that's what we, the demises of various people is what we focused on in
Interesting.
a kind of lighthearted, positive way. It's not all down in the dumps. Yeah.
Do you have a particular story, uh, one that you've had on your podcast that you find particularly fascinating?
Yeah, well, we the whole of course the Manson murders are a big one, and we did a whole documentary about that called "The 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter." And my favorite episode that we've done, I think, was about Tarantino's movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Scott was hired on as a consultant on that. My podcast host was for that film, and so getting the I was on set a couple times for that while they were filming it, and it was like they made a movie for us. And so we did a whole episode about, the kind of the both the story of the Mansons, the that actual story, and but also just going into how the production happened with that with Tarantino and everything was really exciting.
I imagine that would be rather fascinating,
Yeah.
to have been there for that
I
too.
mean, Tarantino turned a lot of LA back to 1969. It's really incredible what he did because he's
Yeah.
so, obsessed with authenticity. He filmed at real places like El Coyote Mexican restaurant on Beverly here in LA, which is the actual place where Sharon Tate and them had their last dinner the night of the murders. That's where he filmed it because it's still there. It's still a popular spot. He did that with quite a few locations around LA that he got access to. It was really cool.
Is it popular because of the notoriety around it?
I
Is
think
it
it's a
still,
little bit of that, and it's also just it's kind of like there's that place and El Compadre are kind of the two really big old school Mexican food restaurants that have been around since like the 60s at least. They just have they're just mainstays. Each new generation seems to discover them. But I do think El Coyote definitely has that extra lore. And we just had the anniversary of the murders a few days ago, and if you go to El Coyote on that night, you'll see some interesting folks there because there are still people who will go there on that night just to kind of eulogize and remember.
really?
Yeah, and you'll even see, I don't know if they still do it anymore, but there's the guest sign-in book, the reservation book there. And that night they were checked under the name Sebring, which was Jay Sebring's name, her former boyfriend or fiance that was murdered with them. So you'll see the name Sebring in the in the reservation book because various people will call and make their reservation under that name.
Under that name.
Yep,
Wow. All
just to remember it.
that is truly fascinating after
Yeah.
all of these years that
Yep.
that kind of, I had no idea
Yep.
that that went on. So
Yeah.
that's fascinating. Well, your podcast does sound interesting for
Thank you.
sure. You're welcome. Before we go, where can people find Sisters of Ukraine?
So you can rent or buy it everywhere that you can find movies online right now. So Amazon, iTunes, Google Play, you can all pay-per-view for most of the major cable carriers and dish networks. You can find it. So pretty much anywhere that you would rent a movie, you can rent it on YouTube, for example. It's everywhere right now.
Wonderful. Well, people really seek this out because it is inspiring and it also, brings this war closer. So, a bird's eye view of
Right.
this film and of what's going on, I mean, in the Ukraine and all of these heroes and heroines who
Sure.
are helping to, to save people. And what more can you ask anybody to ever do in their life is to try to help others and to save their lives. So,
Right.
really, and thank you for putting it together, Mike. It's
Absolutely.
a very important film. So people seek out Sisters of the Ukraine. I wish
Thank
you
you.
much success. You're so welcome.
All right.
Thank you, Mike, for being on the show.